Hello and welcome. This is Aileen. Today, we're going to walk through this video very quickly and explain the 49 processes of project management found in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. Much of what we covered today is based on the PMBOK Guide, though you'll see the wording is simpler. I'm using my basic wording to help us understand these processes. The goal is for us to have a basic understanding of each of the 49 processes. The method: you should pause the video every time you see a process name. Describe the process in your own words, check my description, practice every day until this becomes very easy. The result, the idea here is for this to help you pass the exam. Let's get started. We begin with the initiating process group. Pause the video. What do we mean by this? These are the processes required to get a project or a phase started. There's two processes of initiating. Develop project charter. Pause the video. We're developing the charter. We're authorizing the project. It lists the project objectives and other high-level information. It should name and give authority to the project manager. The other process of initiating identifies stakeholders. Pause the video and give a description. We're identifying anyone who can influence or be influenced by the project or believe they can influence or be influenced. We're asking, what do we know about them? And then we end up listing them in priority. Let's jump into the planning process group. Pause the video and describe it. The process is required to develop a plan to manage a project. So I'm not going to say pause the video anymore. I'm hoping you're with me. Develop project management plan. Integrating the management plans and the baselines so as to have a project management plan. Tells how we plan to manage the project. When we think about planning and scope, there's several processes. We'll take them one at a time. Plan scope management. We're developing the plans for how we will define and manage scope and requirements. Remember, the scope is not found in the scope management plan. The requirements are not found in the requirements management plan. Collect requirements. Working with stakeholders to collect the requirements. Define scope. Defining what work is in and out of scope for the project. Defining the product scope. Finalizing the requirements. Create WBS. Developing the scope baseline to include the approved version of the scope statement, the WBS, and the WBS dictionary. When we get to planning and schedule, plan schedule management, define activities, and then in parallel, we can sequence the activities and estimate the durations. Then we move on to develop the schedule. Plan schedule management. Developing the plan of how we will develop and manage the project schedule. The schedule is not found in the schedule management plan. Define activities, taking the work packages, the lowest level of the WBS, and defining the activities for each work package. Remember, deliverables are in the WBS, activities are in the activity list. Sequence activities, taking the activities and putting them in sequence or in order. Estimate activity durations, estimating how long, from a time period standpoint, each activity will take to complete. Remember, this process is similar to estimate activity resources and estimate costs. Develop schedule. Developing the project schedule, meaning the project timeline, and eventually developing the schedule baseline. When we think about planning and cost, plan cost management, estimate costs, determine budget. Plan cost management. developing the plan of how to estimate and manage costs. Estimate costs, estimating how much the project will cost. Remember, this process is similar to estimate activity resources and estimate activity durations. Determine budget, determining the project cost baseline and funding requirements. Plan cost management, developing the plan of how to define and manage quality on the project. Planning and resource management, there's two processes: plan resource management, estimate activity resources. Plan resource management, developing the plan for both team members and physical resources. Estimate activity resources, estimating both team resources, meaning team members, and physical resources required for the project. With team members, we're thinking about skill set and how many person hours we will need. With physical resources, we're thinking about what kinds of resources we will need, in what quantities. This process is similar to estimate activity durations and estimate costs. Plan communications management, developing the plan of how we are going to communicate with our stakeholders. When you see the word information, please think communications management. Planning and risk management. Notice there's 5 processes here. We're going to take them one at a time. Plan risk management, developing the plan of how to identify, analyze, and manage risk. Remember, the risks are not listed in the risk management plan. Identify risks. Identifying the risks in no priority. Perform qualitative risk analysis, assessing the risks from a subjective standpoint and determining priority. Perform quantitative risk analysis, analyzing higher priority risks and developing a detailed probabilistic analysis for the project. Plan risk responses, developing the risk responses for both threats and opportunities. Updating the project management plan and project documents with these responses. Plan procurement management, deciding with different products and services if we will do the work in-house or purchase outside or use contractors. Developing the plan to make a purchase or bring on contractors. Developing the procurement statement of work as well as the procurement documents, such as a request for proposal or invitation for bid. Plan stakeholder engagement, developing the plan of how we will engage the project stakeholders. Let's move on to the executing process group. The process is required to execute, or you might say implement, the work in the project management plan. Direct and manage project work, following the project management plan and changes made to the plan. Manage project knowledge, sharing organizational knowledge with the project, sharing project knowledge with the organization. Manage quality, following the quality management plan. Focus is on improving processes. When we think of executing and resource management, acquire resources, develop team, and manage team. Acquire resources, acquiring, or you might say obtaining the people, meaning the team members we need for the project, and acquiring the physical resources, such as equipment or materials or supplies we need for the project. Develop team, developing team members as individuals and as a team. Manage team, I think the definition here is a little surprising. Managing team members, that makes sense. Tracking team member performance, managing conflict, providing feedback. For me, that doesn't sound so much like a manage or an executing process. Manage communications, distributing project information based on the communications management plan. This process is closely linked to manage stakeholder engagement. Implement risk responses. It's the risk owners implementing the responses, usually before the risks occur. Examples, maybe they're buying insurance, hiring more people, adding redundancy into a design. Conduct procurements, sending out the request for proposal or invitation for bid or request for quote, receiving the bids or proposals back. Before that, we would hold a bidders conference, decide who we're going to buy from, and putting a contract in place. Manage stakeholder engagement. Following the stakeholder engagement plan, engaging with the project stakeholders. Remember, this process is closely linked to manage communications. Monitoring and controlling process group. The process is required to review how the project is progressing against the project management plan and to recommend changes. Monitor and control project work, monitoring performance, creating work performance reports, perform integrated change control, approving or rejecting change requests, updating the change log, validate scope, accepting the project deliverables, usually performed by the customer. Remember, this process is closely linked to control quality. Control scope, monitoring the project from a scope standpoint, managing the scope baseline. This process is closely linked to control schedule and control cost. Control schedule, hopefully you can guess what I'm going to say. Monitoring the project from a schedule standpoint, managing the schedule baseline. Closely linked to control scope and control cost. The next one should be really easy. Control costs. You tell me monitoring the project from a cost standpoint and managing the cost baseline. Closely linked to control scope and control schedule. Control quality. Determining if the deliverables were built correctly, usually performed by members of the team. Do you know what this process is closely linked to? Great, validate scope. Control resources, ensuring physical resources are available as planned. The key word there is physical. This is not about team members. Monitor communications, determining if the communication plan is working, asking, and we're asking ourselves or we're asking the team. We're asking if the stakeholders are receiving the information they need. Monitor risks, asking if the risk processes are working, identifying new risks, closing outdated risks, asking if the risk responses are working. And again, we're asking ourselves, we're asking our team. Control procurements, managing the relationship with our suppliers, making sure both parties, us and the suppliers, meet the obligations of the contract, closing out contracts with our suppliers or our vendors. Monitor stakeholder engagement, determining if the stakeholder engagement plan is working, asking if the stakeholders are receiving the attention they need. Almost done. Closing process group. The processes, and there's only one, required to close out the project or phase. Close project or phase, turning the product over to the customer or customers, collecting lessons learned, writing the final report, closing out the project. If you like this video, look below if you haven't already and sign up. to receive free online training once a week. Again, this is Aileen. I hope you revisit this video every day until it becomes very easy for you.